For centuries, biology operated under the assumption that animals were unconscious reflex machines. This was a Cartesian hangover, a widespread treatment of non-human life as biological automatons that reacted to stimuli without any internal experience. Two major scientific coalition statements have formally reversed this position: the 2012 Cambridge Declaration and the 2024 New York Declaration on Animal Consciousness both assert that humans are not unique in possessing the neurological substrates that generate subjective experience. The 2024 Declaration identifies a realistic possibility of conscious experience in vertebrates, like reptiles and fishes, as well as invertebrates, including cephalopod mollusks and insects. These declarations target a specific parameter of mind, phenomenal consciousness. This is the subjective, qualitative feeling of what it is like to be an organism experiencing its own existence. This research targets basic sentience. It investigates the baseline capacity for subjective feeling, separate from access consciousness, which is the availability of data for reasoning, and narrative self-awareness, which involves tracking oneself as a character through time. Proving sentience in species that lack human language requires a fundamental shift in methodology. Scientists must abandon the search for human-like reports and establish an entirely new operational metric for the presence of a mind. Human neuroscience is currently in gridlock. There is no unified theory of consciousness, with prominent models like global workspace, which emphasizes a central data exchange, clashing with integrated information theory, which focuses on the mathematical complexity of neural structures. Comparative researchers have adopted a theory-light approach as a pragmatic workaround to this gridlock. A theory-light framework relies on minimal, observable functional markers that correlate with subjective experience. It allows science to move forward by identifying the signs of a mind, rather than waiting to solve the philosophical, hard problem of how matter creates feeling. This model treats phenomenal consciousness as a structural, evolved engineering solution to a specific biological problem. To find consciousness in nature, we must identify the biological challenges that require sentience to solve, rather than searching for human-like brain structures like the neocortex. The simplest nervous systems are capable only of direct stimulus-response reflexes. In these organisms, a specific input triggers a fixed motor output, functioning without the need for an inner experience. Scientists Todd Feinberg and John Malott argue that the first architectural requirement for sentience is the evolution of distal senses. These are systems like vision and olfaction that perceive objects at a distance from the body. These distal senses must send mapped point-by-point signals that physically converge into a single central node in the brain. This neural convergence creates a unified, multisensory mapped image of the external environment. The organism must also demonstrate complex operant learning. This is a behavioral capacity where an animal remembers its history to actively approach helpful stimuli and avoid harmful ones. A unified sensory map tied to operant learning forms the baseline architecture required for affective consciousness, the positive and negative feelings of pleasure and pain. Building and maintaining a unified sensory map requires massive metabolic energy. Evolutionary logic asks why nature would expend these resources. Researcher Michael Trustman identifies the complex active body as the physical driver behind this evolution. A complex active body possesses jointed appendages, multiple degrees of freedom, and adaptations for high-speed locomotion. This body creates a severe cognitive challenge. The brain must extract stable spatial information while receiving a chaotic, rapidly changing flood of sensory motor data. The required architectural solution is a temporal buffer that functions as real-time action control. The first half of this buffer is a short-term subjective past. It is built by retaining a sequence of immediate past moment faces. The second half is a branching subjective future, composed of a tree structure predicting immediate potential moment faces. Phenomenal consciousness is this temporal workspace, an evolved engineering solution required to pilot a complex, fast-moving physical form. If this temporal buffer is an internal architecture, we need a way to verify its existence through observable behavior. Biologists Simona Ginsberg and Eva Jablinka suggest unlimited associative learning, or UAL, as the definitive behavioral transition marker for phenomenal consciousness. UAL goes beyond basic classical conditioning. It requires an animal to forge open-ended, novel chains of association with compound stimuli. The most critical component of UAL is trace conditioning. In trace conditioning, an animal must connect a sensory stimulus to a consequence across a literal gap in time. Successfully bridging that gap proves the existence of an internal temporal buffer. UAL also requires flexible reevaluation. This is where an animal instantly changes its behavior when a former source of reward is modified into a source of punishment. These tasks cannot be performed by an unconscious reflex loop. They require a centralized, conscious workspace that assigns value to experience. When an animal demonstrates unlimited associative learning, it proves the organism possesses the complex sensory maps and temporal buffers that generate phenomenal sentience. Applying this theory light filter, looking for distal senses, complex bodies, and UAL, allows us to map consciousness across the tree of life. This filter eliminates organisms lacking complex active bodies and UAL, such as sponges or simple nematodes, from the sentience debate. The first major lineage to pass the filter is the vertebrates, including mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fishes. The second major lineage to pass is the cephalopod mollusks, such as octopuses and squid, based on their complex bodies and proven UAL. The third lineage to pass the filter is the arthropods. Empirical evidence for trace conditioning and spatial mapping in insects and crustaceans firmly places them within the realm of phenomenal consciousness. The rigorous application of these markers, dismantling human exceptionalism. The distribution of sentience is radically expansive, reaching across diverse branches of the animal kingdom. This expansive distribution leaves a final evolutionary mystery. Did these three distant branches develop consciousness together, or entirely separately? The separate origins hypothesis suggests that phenomenal consciousness is such a powerful biological utility that it evolved independently 3 times to manage complex physical forms. The deep origin hypothesis proposes that sentience evolved exactly once, in a worm-like common ancestor deep in the Cambrian period, before these lineages split. While we can verify that these animals are conscious, the phenomenological question remains. The specific feeling of being an octopus or a bee is locked behind their unique sensory alienness. Our inability to perfectly imagine a bat's experience no longer prevents us from empirically proving that its experience is real. Final thought. Phenomenal consciousness is a tangible, measurable, and highly successful feat of biological engineering that echoes across the tree of life.